U3 lesson 4. So yeah, you want to look for tasks to complete for U3L4. Hopefully that is now accessible. And as usual, we will start off with a little breakout room question. This is sort of a 2-optioner one. I'm going to throw it in the chat right now. Here we go. So question is, who or what do you plan to dress up as this Halloween? Or if you don't have plans, or if Halloween just isn't your thing, who or what would you dress up as if you could get a top quality costume? I'm talking like cosplay, movie set level. Give you 20 seconds to think about that, and then throw you into breakout rooms. Next was just a quick homework review. Assignments are looking good. I'll share my screen here really quickly.
I didn't do my Flipgrid yet. I'm sorry. I haven't had time because I was busy all last night and
How dare
today.
you, Bailey?
I know I am so bad, but I promise I'll get it in ASAP.
That's fine.
Okay.
Thanks for letting me know. Yeah, the drawings look awesome. I'm gonna highlight a few people. Here's Garrett Fernandez. Elbow was definitely a popular choice. Jillian, I think you did the same. And but yeah, just amazing. Really good job with the drawings and the labelings. Cameron did a really good ball and socket as well. And so we'll continue with this similar activity today, but with muscles. So I apologize if you're getting sick of drawing things, but I think it's kind of a good way to learn a lot of this stuff. Flipgrid is looking good. Yeah, I'm seeing 10 responses. And so yeah, if anyone else is, I guess Bailey, then that's the one we're waiting on. And again, you can get that in whenever. It's okay. Take your time. I know these are busy times. Quiz looks good. In fact, answers have been pretty consistent across the board. Everyone got these correct. Was there anything off the top of your head that was challenging or confusing from that quiz or from any of the other assignments? All right. Then I just wanted to delve into some slides to cover the basics of the skeletal muscular system, make sure we're feeling good about that. And then we will do a very similar exercise today than we have done the last 2 lessons, where you'll be choosing a certain limb, doing a drawing and labeling, and then doing a little flip grid on your own body, pointing out different things. So let's just cover the basics. I'm going to share my screen to my iPad here. Should work. All right. Again, I've lost my tabs of view. Can I get verbal confirmation everyone's seeing the skeletal and muscular system slides?
Yes.
Give me a yes. Awesome. These are some of the slides I would basically use in biology, but I want to make sure we're feeling good. The quiz looked great. So there's a lot of confusion between the terms ligaments and tendons. And so please don't, the way I always think about this, ligaments are connecting a bone to bone at the joint, right? I often think of the ACL, which stands for anterior crucial ligament. Anyone know where your ACL is?
In your knee.
Yes, it's one of the major ones in your knee, very commonly torn by military personnel, professional athletes, people who are usually straining their knees a lot. But whenever you hear ligament, think bone to bone. Muscle comes in sort of 3 flavors. You've got skeletal, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's attached to bone, smooth, and cardiac. And so what helps, I think, with the names is this idea of striations, which relates to how much actin and myosin, how much these protein bands are in these muscles. Skeletal muscle is pretty strong. They also have a lot of nuclei, which makes sense because if you're trying to hammer out a lot of protein, muscles need protein to become stronger, to repair themselves. The more nuclei and DNA they can have inside them, the faster that process occurs. Whereas smooth muscle, that's your organs. That's things like your esophagus, mostly in involuntary control. You're not working out your esophagus anytime soon or trying to beef that up. And so we call that smooth just because it doesn't have that striped banding that we see from those proteins. And they tend to only have one nucleus. Cardiac muscle is kind of a unique case because it's kind of, I would think of it as halfway between skeletal and smooth. It's an organ muscle, but it's constantly working. It usually has 1 or 2 nuclei, and so it does have striations that are visible. The terminology with muscles, I know, can get really confusing. So I think what's helpful is just thinking, whenever you hear that term muscle fiber, I know it's a weird word to use, but think of that as a muscle cell. That's the key thing, right? Muscle cells have those 2 proteins inside them, actin and myosin, which I'll go over in more detail in a second. but that's what makes up what's called a myofibril, which are sort of these bands or strings of protein which give your muscle the ability to contract. Muscle cells all together, so think of muscle tissue as a fascicle, and then all of that together, so the tissue itself as one whole unit, that is the body of your muscle, and there's a protective layer around it. You can see the tendon up here attaching it to the bone. Zooming in, again, I like this sort of breakdown of, and you can kind of see what I'm talking about with these striations. Here are those stripes that you can sort of start to see here, but it's those overlaps of protein within each one. So this is breaking down those bands. So here's the muscle cell, and then these are these strings of protein that are inside of it, and we call that a sarcomere if you think of it as a chain with different links. And so here's an image kind of explaining what we mean by striations. So you have striated, unstriated. So this could be skeletal muscle or cardiac muscle because it has these bands or stripes, and that's just showing you the thicker ones are the myosin, and the thinner, lighter colored ones are the actin proteins present in there. Smooth muscle, so if you were to look at muscle from, again, your esophagus or from some other organ like your stomach, wouldn't have this. It would just be sort of uniformly pink. I know some of you are taking the Brains of Behavior course, and the book touches on this, but all of your muscles are innervated with nerves. And this is what's called a, it was a unit. I'm forgetting now the actual name. It's the muscle unit, which is a nerve and all of the different muscle cells that it's attached to and that it can stimulate. At the synapse, there's a certain neurotransmitter, which is a chemical that stimulates muscle contraction, and that's acetylcholine, which is a good chemical to kind of remember the name of. I know this was part of the homework question, but I teach a disease and public health course, and we learned about tetanus. Anyone know what you often get tetanus from? Like, what happens where people freak out and say, oh, you got to go get your tetanus shot? And we know what happens to people sometimes if you're walking around a construction site.
Is it like rusty nails?
Yeah, like if you step on a nail, get a puncture wound from a nail or something like that. It's just a bacteria that could be on anything. It's just that nails usually give you puncture wounds, and so that's how the bacteria can get into your system. But tetanus is kind of scary because it messes with this function, and it can basically cause an overabundance of acetylcholine, or it's not regulated. And so, yeah, you have these really bad spasms, lockjaw, all kinds of things because your muscles are just flexing all the time. So the key thing to remember is that muscles can only contract. Again, this is another sort of common misunderstanding is people think of muscles as being able to pull and push. They can only pull, and our ability to push things comes from the way our muscles are attached to our bones and the kind of leverage they get from that. But that's the only thing they can do. Again, here's a nice little breakdown of the structure, which I went over earlier. And again, I want to kind of zoom in now on the two proteins, the myosin and the actin. And the key thing to understand, I know that a lot of this can be confusing, but the key thing to remember is that the myosin pulls on actin. That's the key thing to remember. Your book talks a lot about adenosine triphosphate, ATP, which is the primary energy source in muscle contraction. The book also touches on another thing, though, which is the importance of calcium, calcium ion in particular, calcium Ca+2, which is really important for the nervous system and allows for these muscle contractions to occur. Again, I'm going to try to keep this very basic, but the way this works, so here's an individual sarcomere. The thick red protein you're seeing here, that's the myosin right there, and then the thinner stuff is the actin. And what happens is all these are like little hands, and it's sort of like a tug of war. The myosin grabs onto the actin, pulls it, detaches, reattaches further up, and pulls again. And so this whole structure here gets pulled inwards during a contraction. And if you think about this happening in millions upon millions of these sarcomeres in your muscles, they actually generate a substantial amount of force. And that's how we're able to flex and lift things and stuff like that. So I mentioned ligaments earlier. Again, don't get confused. So ligament, think of ACL. Tendons are connecting muscle to bone. And I often think of the Achilles tendon. Does anyone know where the Achilles tendon is?
By the heel of the foot.
Yes, right. It attaches your entire calf muscle to the back of to your heel, basically. I'm now, of course, blanking on the name of the bone that we were just talking about, but your heel bone. So tendons are important. They rip a lot. This is one of the things that if you do have a torn muscle, that's usually what's happened is you rip the tendons, and that takes a lot of healing process. It's almost like breaking a bone. You have to wear a cast and let the tendon sort of heal itself. And I like this idea of opposing motion, right? So muscles are antagonistic in that for every muscle you have on one side, there's usually one on the other side that counteracts it. And that's what allows us for a lot of our complex movements and being able to push and pull things. So, you know, the arm, everyone knows you have your biceps and your triceps. In the leg, on the front top of your leg, you have your quadriceps. Anyone know what the opposite of that is in the back that athletes are often pulling?
Glutes?
Glutes are the higher part where your butt is. Right below the glutes is the hamstring, and that's kind of what counteracts the quadriceps muscle on the front. And again, if you choose to look at the leg, you'll be kind of doing a deeper study of that. And we used to dissect chicken wings in biology, and it was something I was hoping to do with you guys as well at home, but touching and messing with raw meat is something that's best done in a controlled environment, so not something I'm comfortable with you trying at home, or at least I don't want to require you to do that. But we would normally look at the bones, which we've learned about. Chicken wing is very similar to a human structure. You can see there's the humerus, they've got a radius and ulna, and then they've got their carpals and metacarpals, and phalanges are sort of all fused together because they don't have individual digits. They do have a thumb actually right there. But the muscle is attached to that to move things back and forth. And then you can literally see, so the tendons again are what connect the muscle to the bone. So every muscle has a tendon hooking it on. You can usually find those. And if you've ever eaten a chicken wing, you've seen these, right? It's that sort of more chewy white stuff that is sometimes coming off with the meat. And then the ligaments are in between the bones, right? It's usually across the bone. Don't confuse that though with cartilage. Cartilage, remember, is the padding between it. It's more like a cap. And that you can definitely also eat. It's that kind of very, very chewy bit that covers almost the entire end of each bone, prevents bones from rubbing against each other. Does anyone know what condition you have? This happens a lot in the elderly when your cartilage has sort of been worn down and so bones begin to rub against each other. It's pretty painful. Does anyone know what that's called?
Arthritis.
Yeah, arthritis is a lack of cartilage. All right, again, that was the basics. That's what I usually would use in biology class. Your book does go into a little more detail from your reading that you did for homework. Any questions on that though? All right. Then the remainder of class time, I want to dedicate to yet another close study. Just to share my screen here one more time. On the tasks to complete list, this is the part 1 and part 2. And again, Julia, if you're having trouble accessing this, I will throw some links up to these. So you should be able to hopefully get to them. And if you click on part 1, it's the same instructions, very similar to how I designed the bone assignment when you were drawing the anatomy of, you have your choice of parts of the body. So you can either do the head and neck, the upper limb, both anterior and posterior view, the lower limb, anterior view only, or wrist and head. And upper limbs is the arm and shoulder, lower limb is the leg. And I have scanned images from your textbook. If you have your textbook, you can also find them. I have the page numbers listed there. The only one that isn't in your book is the hand, but I have access to an image right there that you can look at. I have a guide of what I would like you to label on each of your drawings. It's not necessarily everything that the book shows, so definitely check that. And then once you're done with your drawing, you can move on to the flip grid, which is very similar to what we did before with one added detail. I would like you to, for the same thing that you drew, again on the flip grid, point to the different muscles as best you can and name them. But then what I would like you to do is pick one muscle in particular. And you can find out information from these summary tables. So I have links to the different tables from your book that describe like what the muscle attaches to and what its function is. So I'd like you to pick just one muscle from the limb that you drew and talk specifically about what it does, what is it attached to, and what would happen if it was torn or damaged, or I guess more specifically, what would not be able to happen if it was torn or damaged. And so you're just making a video of yourself doing that. And I have a demonstration video on the Flipgrid post itself that you can check out as well. Any questions on that? I'm gonna time for probably about 30 minutes, half an hour, just to work through this, and hopefully you can get through most of it, and then you don't have to worry about it as homework. I'll be here listening if you've got questions, if you're not sure what to do. But otherwise, let's take 30 minutes to work on the drawing and the Flipgrid. Go for it. Julia, any luck on accessing the tasks to complete?
No.
No? Okay, let me see what I can figure out here. So Julia, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the what would be on the assignment into a Google Doc, and then I'm going to share that with you. It'll have all the links in it, the instructions and everything, and you should be able to see that. Does that work?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, it'll take me like 2 minutes to pull that together.
Okay, thanks.